morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Welcome our home church. Let us prepare our heart and to heaven. Let us sing a song, holy song. Page 5, Spring Song of Eden. Page 5, Spring Song of Eden. The next song is 124, Love is Born Anew. 124, Love is Born Anew. Song is 36, Day of Glory. 36, Day of Glory. us stand up about the heavenly parents, God and true parents. Today is Sunday early morning, June 3rd, 2018. It's about the heavenly parents, God and true parents. 근데 join me in prayer. 살아계시는 하나님 아버지 전부모님 안녕하십니까? Most precious our heavenly parents, God and true parents. We are so grateful. We are coming here, the New Hampshire, Gorham, in the new chapter of life, and the new home church programs begin. We are so grateful that close to the white mountain, and the mountain range is so beautiful, and clear water, clear air, and sun is high, so beautiful sun, and many tourism coming here, and hiker, and all people is rejoicing and relaxing and receive your spirit. Heavenly Parents, God, we are so grateful to start a new day and new week. The most exciting time here in the Gorham. We are grateful to receive your guidance and life in our life, Heavenly Parents, God. We are grateful. We are preparing our heart toward you and truth and true love. We are grateful. Please guide us to see us your vision in our life, and we can be humble to front of you and learn and grow like a little child. Please bless this week. Please guide our Pastor Montanaro can guide us to next life, Heavenly Parents. We are grateful to receive your word. Please guide us. Thank you very much. I report in the name of Raman and Tabiko Montanaro, blessed Central family. Aju, Amen. Amen. Thank you. Please seated, everyone. And welcome Pastor Montanaro.
Hi, everybody. Hi. Welcome to Gorham, New Hampshire. Woo! Woo! So we're in our new home, and it's been a wonderful, roller coaster the last 10 months, or actually 1 year, since basically since my job ended in Connecticut. We were sort of uncertain about our future, and now we have a good, stable future looking ahead of us. And I think that we are really grateful to God for all of that He has given us over the last year. And the Olson family in Jefferson, Maine, have given us so much too of their time and of their hearts to let us stay there. And we're really grateful. But this is a new beginning, and we're really excited about the fact that we can give our first sermon here in Gorham, New Hampshire, right in the shadow of the White Mountains, right near Mount Washington. We're only about 8 miles away from Mount Washington, and Mount Washington is one of the highest peaks in the Northeast, and it's also the center of the Appalachian Trail, comes through the Mount Washington, comes right through Gorham. So as my wife prayed, there are many hikers and skiers and snowboarders and snowmobilers and ATVers and all kinds of mountain sports and all kinds of hiking and all kinds of, there's the Androscoggin River is just flowing next to our home. So you couldn't pick a more beautiful place to be on the East Coast, really, in my opinion. I mean, I have many friends that swear by the ocean. They love the ocean. They can't live without the ocean. But myself, I'm never really drawn to the ocean. I'm more drawn to the mountains. And of course my name, Montanaro, in Italian means mountain person, a mountaineer. So, and my ancestors came from the mountains in Italy. So I'm really happy. I feel at home here, and I know this is going to be the beginning of a wonderful adventure. So I chose a reading today. Actually, God chose it kind of for me. So if you'd open your books up, this is Father's autobiography. I'll put the link online so that this is you can read the whole autobiography online. If you go to TP or tparents, I think it is .org, tparents.org, you can find all the literature of our movement. Literally hundreds and hundreds of volumes of text, of father speeches, of books, of biographies, songbooks. I mean, everything is there. So if you want to research about our movement, if you want to find out more, then I think tparents.org. But anyway, you'll see if you click on the link for this, the branch website, the head website is embedded in that URL. So you can find everything there if you want. This is Father's autobiography. He wrote this in the years toward the end of his life as a kind of a chance for people who didn't know him to get to know him, his life, his childhood, his early years, his early church, the church's expansion, rapid expansion and growth, his expansion to other countries besides Korea, finally arriving in the United States, 1965 doing a world tour, setting up holy grounds in all 50 states and 40 countries of the world. And then coming to America in 1971 and really settling in America. America represented the world to Father. Father said, America is the world. John Lennon agrees, by the way. John Lennon said, America is Rome. America is the Roman Empire. And New York City, he said, was Rome itself. And so, you know, in the sense that in the 2,000-year period since Jesus, God has recreated the foundation for the Messiah to come, which, as we know, was Reverend Moon. He came in the second coming of the Messiah position. But everything was recreated. The chosen people, the Jewish people, as Jesus said, could no longer be the chosen people to receive the second coming of the Messiah, because they had failed to receive the first coming, and they still didn't believe in Jesus. So how could they be chosen to receive the second coming? Who was the chosen people to receive the second coming? Christianity. Christianity was the chosen people, but they didn't have a country. So what nation would be the nation to receive the second coming? A nation that had suffered for hundreds of years, actually, like the Jewish people had suffered for hundreds of years. A nation where Satan and God met, good and evil met. A nation that had undergone a 40-year period, or number 40-based period of persecution, like the Jewish people had undergone 400 years of persecution under Greece and Rome. And a nation that was homogeneous, that kept its purity, that its blood lineage was important. Just as the Jewish people that want to marry other Jewish people. They don't want to intermarry with other cultures because they want to keep the purity of the chosen people. And the Korean people have that kind of same sense of national and racial and ethnic identity. Also a nation that was very religious. You know, of all the Asian nations, the only Asian nation in the Far East to accept Christianity was Korea. The missionaries went to China, failed. Went to Japan, failed. And that's not to say that there were not great successes in China and in Japan, and great sacrifices made by the missionaries that went there. And there is still a foothold of Christianity in Japan and in China. Maybe 1 or 2% of the population. But once Korea accepted Christianity, it went crazy. Their churches popped up everywhere. After the Japanese occupation ended in 1945, Father said, churches popped up in Pyongyang like mushrooms after the rain. You know, like boom, boom, every corner there were Christian churches. And these are devout Christian churches. This is not just in name only, you know, churches. These are Christians who devoutly believe in Jesus and are waiting for the second coming of Christ. Many of the churches were prophetic. They believed that the Messiah was coming in their lifetimes. Some of them even received the revelation that the Messiah was coming to Korea. There was the kind of spiritual activity and foment like you saw at the time of Jesus with the Essenes. And many of the religious groups around the time of Jesus were very devout, very fanatical. Because the Messiah was going to be born to Israel. And so you have people like the shepherds and the different people that prophesied of the birth of Jesus in Bethlehem. And you have signs and wonders and amazing things around the birth of Jesus. The same thing happens in Korea. Korea is on fire religiously when Father is born. And throughout his lifetime, Christianity has been most powerful in Korea. So, for all these reasons, God chose Korea as the central Christian nation to receive the Messiah. Not the United States or England or France, where you see the birthplace of modern Protestant Christianity. Not the Italy or other countries that you saw the foundation of Catholicism, but in a small country that was occupied. Much as Israel, at the time of Jesus, was a small, occupied country. It wasn't the most powerful country on earth. That was wrong. Israel was a weak country politically, militarily. But in terms of passion, in terms of power, no country rivaled Israel. And it's ironic. Many people who know Koreans and know Jews say there's a lot of similarities between Jewish people and Korean people. Many, many similarities. In fact, I've talked to many Green Berets and soldiers who fought in the Korean War and in Vietnam. And Vietnam, the Republic of Korea, ROK, the ROK, they call them ROK troops, were sent to Vietnam to help fight communism there. All of my friends in the military say the most feared troops in the world by any enemy are the Republic of Korea and the Israelites. The Israeli troops and the Republic of Korea troops are the most dangerous in battle. They take no prisoners. They will fight until the death. And they're unafraid. They're totally unafraid. They will go into battle and they will fight to the death. The spirit of Israel and the spirit of Korea is very similar. Kind of an absolute determination. It can make them real jerks too. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, so Koreans and Israelis can be real jerks sometimes. And I think they'll be the first to admit that. Yeah. That they can be too stubborn. They can be really, if they're bad, they can be really bad. Yep. But if they're good, they can be really good. So that kind of absolute intensity God was looking for. And he found it in Reverend Moon. And Reverend Moon came as the second coming of the Messiah. And in 1971, he came to Rome. He came to the United States of America. And he began his worldwide ministry here in the United States. And within 5 years, he was a household word. A household name. And then the negativity and persecution started pouring in by about 1975, 1976. Because in the beginning, they thought he was a very kind of curious and interesting phenomenon. This Korean man that comes from Korea, and he's cute. He looks cute, and he smiles a lot. And look, we sent missionaries to Korea, and now, you know, the Koreans are sending a missionary here. How cute. And then they heard what he was saying. And it wasn't cute. He was blasting America, and he was blasting Christianity. And he was blasting them for not fulfilling their responsibility in front of heaven. And of course, because of that, he made enemies. In other words, he made enemies in the Christian church community, because not just because he was blasting them, but because he was making it clear that his position was like a Messiah's position, that he came to save America. And Americans thought that was really arrogant. How could a yellow man come and save America? You have to remember, we'd just gotten out of the Vietnam War, where we fought for 10 or 15 years against Asians. That followed the Korean War, where we fought for 3 years against Asians. And that followed the World War II, where we fought for 5 years against Asians in Japan. So with the Japanese and the Koreans and the Vietnamese, as Americans, we'd had some pretty unpleasant experiences with Asians. And so suddenly this Asian man comes, and there was a lot of racism in America. Now it's different. Now you see Asian and American Western couples all over the place. It's very common. And it's welcomed. It's very rare to find that kind of racism anymore. But in 1973, 74, right at the end of the Vietnam War, America was very wary of Asians. Plus, our POWs, our prisoners of war, had had a bad experience. Many of them had been captured either by the Japanese or by the Koreans or by the Vietnamese. And lacking a Christian foundation, the Asian culture doesn't have the same kind of rules of war that Western European countries have that adopted at the Geneva Convention, for instance. We've always believed that war was bad in Christianity, right? Killing is bad. But there's always in Christian theology the idea of a just war. Many Christian theologians have spent their lifetimes studying and praying and trying to write about when is it acceptable for Christians to go to war? And when is it unacceptable? The idea of being the aggressor was one of the key points, that, a Christian nation should never be the first one to attack. That was one of the principles that they kind of came up with in the idea of a just war, a righteous war. That it should be for a purpose to liberate or save people from suffering. In other words, there are many criteria that Christians thought about in terms of why we should go to war. It's not just to get territory, not just to make money, not just to enslave people. Although when we look at the history of Christian countries, all those things have happened. But when we look at within the countries, you see there's an inner force working in Christian countries, that when their government goes to war in an evil way, many Christians refuse to go. They become conscientious objectors. They fight against the war from within their country. So Christians have had an ameliorating effect, a softening effect on Christian countries' wartime activities. But in Japan, in China, in North Korea, the communist North Korea, in Vietnam, you find that lacking. And so the kind of barbaric practices, for instance, the Japanese, during the height of the World War II, practiced cannibalism. There was cannibalism. They would kill and eat the liver and the heart of their enemy. Many POWs experienced this. On the island that the Marines landed on after Iwo Jima, I think, after or before Iwo Jima, there was a prison camp there, and they experienced cannibalism. The surviving prisoners told of this. And the Japanese also told of this. Some of them repenting in tears for what they'd done during the war. But this kind of brutality, our soldiers could not imagine, and they were subjected to this kind of brutality. And the torture that they were put into in Vietnam, by the Japanese, by the North Koreans, to try to get information, extract information, and confessions of guilt and this kind of thing by the communists, was something that Americans had never imagined before. And they found that some of their best soldiers under torture, would come on camera and say, America is evil, America has to quit the war, I believe in the North Vietnamese, cause. And they were tortured. They had clearly been tortured. And this practice came to be known as brainwashing. So Americans had this bad taste in their mouth from Asians feeling that they were brainwashers, that they used torture to get people to change their thinking. So when Reverend Moon came to America, the critics of him, knowing that Americans would really react strongly to any charge of brainwashing, accused our church of brainwashing its members to follow Reverend Moon. Later on, that was thrown out. But for about 10 years, we suffered a lot of accusation and a lot of confusion and misunderstanding and distrust because people thought that the Moonies brainwashed their members. That even my mother called me up, and in 1980 I had just joined the church, and my brother gave her the book Crazy for God, which is a really negative book about our church. And so she read this book and she was terrified. Now she's been a vegetarian since 1960. And I ate more meat in one day than she ate in a whole year. But she called me up and she's like really scared on the phone. I could tell she was scared. Hi, Ron. I heard that you joined this movement, and that I want to know, how is your diet? Are you eating well? Did you get enough protein? Because these books were accusing Father of taking away our protein so that we could be weak and we would give in to brainwashing. And I think I just had a bean and beef burrito about this big that day when she called. I was like, Mom, I just had a bean and beef burrito. Leave me alone. I was in Los Angeles. She was calling from the East Coast, but we're 3 hours different. They talked for 5 hours, and I was yelling and I'm saying, Mom, you got to believe, And she was like, but I'm really worried. And then after all of this, she hung up, and 5 minutes later, she called me back and she said, I'm sorry. I realized that you would not do anything that would hurt you. This kind of thing. But even my mother, who was a vegetarian and practicing yoga in the 1960s, she was arrested for indecent exposure for doing yoga in Central Park in New York City in about 1963 or 64, 65, something like that. Yeah. The police arrested her. She went to court, and the judge was like smiling like this, and he was like this, and he threw it out of court, basically, But this is the climate that was America, in the 60s. And then this woman who would ask people to stop smoking on subways, you know what I mean? In the New York City, you could smoke in the subways until about 1970, something like that, 1975. It was like a cloud. The door would open and there'd be a cloud. It was awful. And my mother would ask everyone around, please, would you put out your cigarette? Would you put out your cigarette, please? Very politely, in an English accent. And they would do it. Because they'd never been asked by anyone to put out a cigarette before. And they were like, oh, all right. Like, what's this crazy lady want me to put out a cigarette? They put out their cigarette, And so this woman who's always on the cutting edge of everything is the one asking me if I'm eating enough protein and worried that I might have been brainwashed. It only took her 5 hours to figure out that it was not true. But still, for 5 hours and she was worried. My point is that if she's worried, think about regular Americans that don't have kind of an open mind. It's even today, there's some people that believe our movement is guilty of brainwashing, and that we are mindless zombies, robots that are doing Reverend Moon's will. Because it's easier to believe that than to believe that young people, who even their own parents couldn't get them to cut their hair, hippies, during the 1960s. They joined our movement. Many hippies joined our movement in the 60s and 70s because they were searching, right? They were searching for meaning. And they were the ones who were out there. If they were in an established church, maybe they weren't searching. They were content. So they weren't looking at Reverend Moon. But hippies and people who were following the counterculture were looking for answers. So many times they joined our movement, they had long hair and beards. Many of my friends, who now look sort of, clean cut and everything, I saw pictures when they joined. I'm like, wow, is that you? You know, they had long hair, bushy afros or something like this, big beard, you know. And then within a week, they heard Divine Principle. They shaved, they cut off their hair, they put on a tie. Their parents are like, you know, I've been asking you to do this for 5 years and you didn't want to do it. And this Reverend Moon, this Asian guy asks you and you do it? And so they thought we were brainwashed because we were, you know, like they couldn't control our behavior, but Reverend Moon could. So this was the kind of thing that we were dealing with. And Father pushed forward. He spoke publicly in many, many cities across America. Actually, in the beginning, he was given keys to the city by the mayors of the city and many things. He spoke in a 7-city tour, and then a 21-city tour, and then a 32-city tour. And then he spoke at Yankee Stadium, and he spoke at Madison Square Garden in 1974. Actually, first in Madison Square Garden in 1974, September 18, 1974, to a sold-out crowd in Madison Square Garden. And then he, 2 years later, in 1976, which was the 200-year anniversary, birthday of America, he wanted to commemorate that year by having a God Bless America festival, and he had one in Yankee Stadium. And then just 2 months later, without any preparation, he brought 300,000 people to Washington Monument for a historic gathering for the God Bless America festival. And that was really the culminating point of Father's work in America in 1976. After that, he kind of gave the responsibility to us, to the members. Now you do what I did. You go and do home church. Go out and love your neighborhood. Love your people. But the persecution was too much for most of us. And we just caved in. We sort of hid. We didn't really want to go out and face the persecution. And so our movement really kind of stagnated after that. It grew rapidly until 1980. But after about 1979, 1980, it kind of stagnated. No one else, we couldn't get, nobody wanted to go out witnessing. Nobody wanted to face the persecution, the negativity. Father was unafraid of it. Father had been through hell. He wasn't afraid of persecution. But our members became afraid and withdrew. And Father continued to try to exhort us, please, it's your turn now. It's your turn now. It's your turn now. But many of our members didn't want to do it. As we got families and our children growing up, Father was guiding us and guiding us and guiding us, and the movement continued to grow and develop. Communism fell, largely due to Father's work with the Washington Times and the Victory Over Communism movement, and CAUSA, which was a Latin American anti-communist group that Father founded. So Father built up this foundation worldwide. He continued to work, in other words, worldwide. But the core of Father's hope was that we would take Father's responsibility. He has shown us how to do it, and he wanted us to take his responsibility. But I think most of us didn't do it. Become home church pastors, become tribal messiahs. So, as time went by, our families grew, our children are getting older, and they're looking at us, our kids are looking at us, and they're saying, well, if you really believe that Reverend Moon's the Messiah, why aren't you doing anything about it?
It's true.
Right? If you really believe Reverend Moon is the second coming of Christ, you should be living a lot more passionately than you're living. You should be putting your life on the line for this idea. But most of the parents they saw were not. And our movement has been going through this growth pains, I would call it, where it finally our members, I think, are getting forced by circumstances. Father died in 2012. So about 6 years ago, a little bit less than 6 years ago, Father passed away. He went to the spirit world. So he couldn't be here anymore pushing us around. And so our members now kind of split up into different kind of comfort zones, different groups. But ultimately, I know that until we do home church, until we do tribal messiahship, we're not going to build the kingdom of heaven on earth. Not by following Reverend Moon, but by becoming small Reverend Moons. So I want to read to you, there was a long introduction, wasn't it? This is the story of Father's life. And I recommend everyone read it from cover to cover. It's his own autobiography, as well as the divine principle, Reverend teaching. So you should be reading your Bibles always, right? You should know the Bible by heart. You should read it from cover to cover. And then you should read the divine principle, the exposition of the divine principle. Because this is the core of Father's teaching. This is Father's life. This is Father's teaching. This is more important. Father would say that. This is the core. Please read this. I'll put the link for this online as well. But today I want to go back. We'll open to page 115. Well, we're going to go back to Father's, after he was imprisoned in a slave labor camp, a gulag, in North Korea, and tortured, not for 2 or 3 months, but for 2 years and 8 months. He underwent systematic, grueling mistreatment and torture. And finally, MacArthur's landing at Incheon and the victory that MacArthur brought in the Korean War, pushing the communists back right to the border with China, liberated the prison camp that Father was in Hungnam, North Korea. So then Father walked all the way to the southern tip of Korea, about 600 miles. Pushing, actually, most of the way, pushing a man with a broken leg on a bicycle that had no tires, just rims. And he just pushed this man all the way, 600 miles, through mountain paths in the winter with his other disciple, Hyun Shil Kang. And they set up in Pusan, the only safe zone at that time, because the communists had pushed the Allies right back to the southern tip of Korea. So Father went to join the refugees in Pusan. And then he was emaciated. He was like he had not eaten for 2 years and 8 months. He had been starved to death. But he made a little mud hut using mud and the ration boxes from the United States military, the cardboard boxes, and rocks, and mud as mortar. He made a mud and mortar and rock house with a cardboard and mud roof so that they could have some shelter. And this house could fit in this room easily. It was that small. And he and Hyun Shil Kang lived there. And he was writing the divine principle by pencil out so that, keep in the original manuscript. And then as soon as he got finished that, he began to preach in the mud hut, in front of the mud hut. And people could hear him. He was on top of a mountain, like a hillside. But they would come up and they would hear this crazy man because there was a well there. So let's read that chapter. And it's interesting too. We won't read the whole chapter, just the first 2 pages. But it's interesting that the first woman that joined is now Father's wife, Mrs. Kang. So we're going to read about her story too. So let's go to page 115. It's called The Crazy Handsome Man by the Well. Do you all have that? Page 115. The Crazy Handsome Man by the Well. When we built the mud-walled house and began the church in Pumnekal, there were only 3 people to hear me preach. For me, however, I was not talking to just those 3 people. I thought to myself, though they cannot be seen, I am preaching to thousands, even tens of thousands. And actually, I'm going to say one more thing. One of the reasons I did choose this is because here we are in Gorham. And we have such a better situation than Father in a mud hut in Pumnekal with refugees starving to death all around. We have a beautiful home right in one of the most pretty cities in northern New Hampshire. And we're starting our mission now, our ministry now. And we hope that all of Gorham will come and hear. So that's our goal, is to teach the divine principle like Father. So I thought this is very appropriate for our first sermon in Gorham. Okay? So Father said, I thought to myself, though they cannot be seen, I am preaching to thousands, even tens of thousands. I envisioned as I preached that all humanity was in attendance. These 3 people sat before me while I conveyed the words of the principle in a loud, booming voice. There was a well in front of our house. Soon, a rumor began to spread among those who came to take water from that well, that a crazy man lived in the house with mud walls. They fetched their water and peered into this ramshackle mud house to see a man in wretched clothing speaking like he was shouting commands to the whole world. It is only natural that people began to whisper among themselves. I preached that heaven and earth would be turned upside down and Korea would unite the world. It's interesting now, even though Father's passed away, that Korea is still one of the only hot spots, the Middle East and Korea, the two hot spots, that world peace is hinging on what happens on the Korean peninsula. Interesting, right? Father's words are prophetic. He preached that in 1952, 53, right? 65 years ago, 68 years ago. Rumors about me soon spread beyond those using the well to those at the bottom of the hill. Perhaps these rumors are what brought people coming out of curiosity to see the crazy man living next to the well. Among these curious ones were students from a nearby seminary, as well as a group of professors from the prestigious Ewha Women's University. The rumors became embellished to say that I was a handsome man with good stature. So middle-aged women began to climb the hill to see me as a way to pass the time. So checking him out. His father was very, very handsome when he was young. I mean, he was good looking even as an old man, you know. But when he was young, he was really handsome. Very handsome man. On the day I finished writing Wali Wanbon, the original form of the principle, I put my pencil down and prayed. The moment has come for me to evangelize. Please send me the saints to whom I may give witness. After this, I then went out to the well. It was May 10th, late spring. I was wearing traditional Korean trousers with cotton lining and an old jacket, sweating in the heat. I caught sight of a young woman wiping the sweat from her brow as she struggled up the hill toward the well. I spoke to her, saying, God has been giving you tremendous love for the past 7 years. She jumped backward in surprise. It had been 7 years since she had decided to dedicate her life to God. My name is Hyun Shil Kang, she said. I am an evangelist at the Pusan church that sits in the neighborhood at the bottom of this hill. I heard there is a crazy man living here, so I have come to witness to him. This was how she greeted me. I invited her into our house. She looked around the squalid room, making plain how very strange she found it. Eventually, her eyes settled on my desk. Why do you have so many pencils? She asked. Until this morning, I replied, I was writing a book that reveals the principles of the universe. I think God has sent you here so that you can learn about these principles from me. What principles? I am here because I heard there is a crazy man living here who needs to be witnessed to. I handed her a cushion to sit on, and I sat down as well. The spring water made its trickling sound as it flowed beneath us. In the future, Korea will play its role at the pinnacle of the world, I said. People will regret that they could not be born as Koreans. She clearly thought I was speaking nonsense. Just as Elijah appeared in the person of John the Baptist, I continued, Jesus will come in the flesh to Korea. This made her angry. I'm sure Jesus will have better places to come than a place so wretched as Korea, she retorted. Then she said, have you ever read the book of Revelation? I have. I interrupted her mid-sentence, saying, you want to say you have studied at the Goryeo Theological Seminary. How did you know that? She demanded. Do you think I would have waited for you without knowing even that much about you? You said you came here to witness to me. Please then, teach me Hyun Shil Kang was clearly knowledgeable in theology. She quoted Bible texts to me, one after another, in an effort to attack my views. She continued to challenge me strongly as I kept responding to each of her challenges with answers in a strong and clear voice. Our debate continued so long that it began to grow dark, so I stood up and cooked dinner. The only thing we had besides rice was some overripe kimchi. Kimchi is cabbage, fermented with spicy red peppers or other ingredients common to Korean cuisine. Nevertheless, we sat there with the sound of water trickling below and shared this food before resuming our debate. She came back the next day and the day after that, each time to continue our debate. In the end, she chose to devote her life to the principles I teach. So father actually met his wife by being that was his first spiritual child after being tortured in North Korea. It was his first spiritual child, became his wife. And not only that, he wasn't afraid of what people think. Are you guys afraid of what people think about you? Are you afraid of what people think about you? People think about you at home? I think it's natural. We want to fit in. We want to fit in. I heard, we just had a graduation, right? Akiko just graduated from high school in Lincoln Academy. And, they have graduation speeches. And, the classic thing is, commencement. It is not an end. It is a beginning. This kind of thing. And every exit is a entrance to someplace else. And, this kind of thing. You always get this kind of thing, right? And, all these kind of platitudes, these things that you say to graduates and stuff like that. But one of the ones I heard that really is a good one is, they're all good. But this is something I really like. Don't try to fit in. Seek to stand out. Great, right? What's the opposite of fitting in? The opposite of fitting in is standing out. A lot of people think the opposite of fitting in is being an outcast, being cast out. But it all depends on how you look at it. Right? Right? Are you being cast out? You could say, father was an outcast, right? His whole life, in one sense, he was an outcast. But he didn't see it that way. He said, I am standing out. I'm not going to fit in to what everybody else is doing. Because if I do that, the result will be the same thing as everybody else is getting. How can I hope to change the world if I don't change the way that I live? If I don't change the way I live, I can't change the world. If I live the same way as everybody else, how can I change the world? How can I encourage other people to change if I don't show the example? That means I have to live in a way that no one else is living. That means I'm not going to fit in. And of course, 95% of people, when they see that you don't want to fit in, they cast you out. You don't fit in? You're not trying to fit in? You don't want to belong to us? Okay, get out. Right? Some people say, America, love it or leave it. Right? America, right or wrong. That's not right. You should not support America whether it's right or wrong. You should fight America when it's wrong and make it right. And it's not right to say, America, love it or leave it. How can you love something that's evil? Is there evil in America? Yes. Should we love the evil? No. So America, love it or leave it's a wrong saying. America, right or wrong, is a wrong saying. We have to think, if I love something, I'm going to fight with it. That's another thing that Koreans and Jews have in common. Koreans and Jews can fight with each other, screaming at each other. And the next day, they're best friends. One of the things that Japan doesn't know how to do, they're very good at working together, like ants or bees in a colony. Everyone knows their responsibility, their role, and they all fulfill their roles, and they fit in. They're great at fitting in. The Japanese are masters of fitting in. Americans are actually kind of independent, right? Americans kind of like to stand out, like to be their own people. They have a hard time actually working together sometimes, Americans. Team spirit and all. But the Japanese are masters of fitting in. But to fit in, they have to crush each other's hearts. So one thing that Japan does is, like England, which does the same thing, England also likes to fit in the old days. I think it's changing now. But the idea of the nation working together for something, you know, the English, there's a proper way to do things. English politeness, the English, you know, kind of rigidity. Like everything's so tight. I just saw the King's Speech. Who's seen the King's Speech? What's his name, the actor? Colin Firth, right? Colin Firth. And Helena Bonham Carter stars as his wife. And Geoffrey Rush stars as the teacher that teaches the King of England, King George VI, how to speak. He has a stammer. He can't get words out. And for a king not to be able to speak to the people right before World War II is unacceptable. So he found a very unorthodox teacher, Geoffrey Rush, who didn't want to treat him like a king, taught him like a friend. Said, you have to be my friend or I can't teach you. So then he taught him how to speak. And the movie's a very good movie, very moving. But you can see, and the king talks about it, the king, you know, Colin Firth's character talks about how tight English society is. The monarchy and everything, and everyone's got their place, you know. In Chariots of Fire, also another film, the Lord Lindsay, you know, who is a very wealthy lord, who's one of the team that runs in Paris with Harold Abrahams and with what was the Scottish runner's name? Eric Liddell. Eric Liddell. They were the stars of the movie, but the other members of the team, one of them was an English lord, and he was with them in Cambridge. His name was Lord Lindsay. He was very funny and charming. But in Paris, they had a banquet. Like before the Olympics start, they had this big gala event. Everyone's wearing tuxedos, and you know it's like this. And the Prince of Wales, the future king, actually David, the one who didn't take the monarchy, the one who wanted to marry an American divorcee. And because of that, he had to give up the throne. He had to, what's the word, abdicate, right? He had to abdicate. And so his younger brother, who in the King's Speech movie was played by Colin Firth, actually takes up the throne. But in this movie, in 1924, before this, he's still the Prince of Wales, and he's a playboy. And he comes in, and Lord Lindsay says to his friends, indispensable, my dear fellow. We need him here. He's here to show us what to do, and more importantly, what not to do. You know, so it's like the king and the monarchy, the royal family sets the tone for politeness, for manners in British society. And then the lords, and then the House of Lords. And it's very tight. And Japan has the same kind of spirit. These island nations have this kind of tight spirit. But to get there, they have to crush the individuality, the creativity, the passion, the honesty of each person's heart. And that's a shame. But Koreans are not like that. Jews are not like that. Israelis are not like that. They're so honest, they just create enemies with one word, you know. But they fight, and then they can stay together again. So this is something that the Korean people have. We are here in Gorham, and it's a beautiful day today, and this is our first sermon in Gorham. And I pray that as time goes forward now, we are living here, we can begin to invite people to our home. We couldn't really invite people to our home in Jefferson because it wasn't our home. So we had still some guests that came sometimes, but basically we had to wait. But now, let's not wait anymore, okay? It's like Father finished writing the Divine Principle, and he put the pencil down and said, okay, now it's time to evangelize. And he went to the well. And the first person he met, God sent her. What kind of woman could fight with this crazy man And then come back the next day and keep fighting, and next day and keep fighting until finally she says, you're right, I'll join. These are crazy people. She's just as crazy as he is. But there are some crazy people in Gorham too. Crazy people who are willing to follow the Messiah, even though it's not popular, even though you don't fit in. Let's not fit in, you guys. Okay? Let's not fit in. Let's stand out. And if they want to cast us out, that's their business. But from my point of view, I want to stand out. I don't want to wait for them to cast me out. I don't want to be in. Doesn't mean I don't love you. I just don't want to fit in. I want to stand out. I want to start something new. I want to say something new. I want to make a new beginning for humankind. And I hope you can join me. Stand out. Don't fit in. Speak your mind. I'll leave you with this one thing that Father said. Beautiful, beautiful thing. I live my life by this, or I try to. I don't think I do all the time. But please remember these words. This is the greatest words to live by. Do not speak if your heart is silent. Do not act until your heart is sincerely moved. Again, do not speak if your heart is silent. Do not act unless your heart is sincerely moved. So let's follow our heart. Let's get our heart moved. Let's speak from our hearts. Let's be sincere. Let's speak honestly to people. Let's speak from our heart. And if your heart tells the opposite side, the flip side of that coin is, right? The opposite is this. If your heart is telling you to speak, you have to speak. And if your heart is moved, you have to act. Right? That's the flip side of that. So please, speak from your heart. Make good friends in this town. Be honest to people. Be yourself. Don't fight. Don't be antagonistic, but don't try to fit in and be one of the gang and invisible. Don't be invisible. Stand out. Please join me in prayer. Dear Heavenly Father, we want to thank you. This is our first sermon and our humble beginnings in our new home. Thank you, Father, so much for this home. Thank you so much for this town of Gorham. I pray that we can really honor this town and take care of this town as the parents of this town. We can become true parents to this town. We can become true parents to this whole northern New Hampshire and even western Maine, where I come from, South Paris. I hope my friends are watching and that you can take the journey to Gorham. It's not far. We're only 20 miles from Bethel and probably only 35 miles or so from South Paris. I hope my friends can join us here. I hope that the town of Gorham can join us here, that this room can become too small, and that we have to go to the park, Father, where they have a lovely park. Right across the street from us is the central commons of town, and there's a wonderful kind of gazebo there where they have beautiful, in the summertime, every Tuesday night, they have musical offerings, some classical, some jazz, or some folk, or country, or different kinds of music that's played there. We can actually take that and make outdoor sermons there if we have too many people. Father, I pray that we can have those kind of happy problems, that this house becomes too small to fit the number of people. Father, our true parents did it. We have to do the same thing. Let us be courageous. Let us not seek to fit in and be invisible, but to be visible, to be honest, to be sincere, to stand out, to stand up and to stand out, Father, in the crowd. And to lead by example, by love, by honesty, by sincerity, and by truth. I ask your blessing on this day and on this new beginning, Father. And we offer everything to you. 축복 중심 가정, 라만과 다미고 못하는 이름으로 포고드립니다. 아주. 아멘.